So it turns out the world didn't end. Last time we thought the world was going to end, and it didn't. So far.
I know. And as big of a punk as Putin is, I feel like we need to give him props for no terrorist attacks happening.
Don't call him a punk. Never call Vladimir Putin a punk.
Do you think he listens? He's a fan. He listens to our podcast.
I got a text from him just the other day. He was like,
"You mention me or you die."
He was like, "I love to ride horses and I love to listen to Dukes of Hazzards." That's
great.
But yeah, he did. He kept it. He went after Ukraine, but he kept the terrorists away from the Olympics. So all kudos to them.
What if the 10 years of planning for the Olympics was all just a cover so he could invade Crimea?
Wow. That's diabolical. It just might be true.
That's dedication, man.
So here we are. We're back. You're on the phone from deep inside a norovirus investigation.
Yeah, I'm on site at a norovirus investigation across Brooklyn. Also happens to be my house.
Also your stomach.
Also happens to be confirmed norovirus.
So if any odd silences come, we'll just assume that you're vomiting into a toilet somewhere.
Oh, man, it is not fun, but... for the public, here I am.
Thanks. You're doing a good thing. So today, it's a very special episode of Dukes of Hazzards. We've got the disaster news rundown, but we've also got an interview with Alex Theran, who is on site in the Philippines, and she's going to give us a really great, I think, breakdown of the work over there, and especially some kind of on-site personal stuff that you don't hear about when you talk about disaster news and how response works.
Yeah, I'm really excited about this. I mean, this is a huge disaster that's kind of lost the attention of the public just because there's been so many more, myself included. So I'm really excited to hear what Alex has done over there. So
here we go with Dukes of Hazzards. You're gonna break it down a little. I'm an awesome interviewer.
It's great. You may win an Oscar. They give out Oscars for podcasts, right?
Really? Are they called Poskers? Or are they called Oddcasts? Nice. All right. So what have we got?
All right. Yeah. So a few news stories to hit this week. Business Week is reporting that 420,000 ATMs in the United States have until April 8th to upgrade from Windows XP because that's a date that Microsoft cuts off support to those ATMs. And now it doesn't mean that ATMs will stop working. It just means they're going to be more prone to malware and vulnerabilities. But, reading the story, the thing that went through my mind was, what if all ATMs stopped working?
Yeah, it's like in Terminator 2, that guy John Connor, he learns how to hack into the ATMs. I think if it's all Windows XP and malware, I think we can all do that. We'll just get little clicks from different African countries on our screen, and it'll offer us money that way instead of actually from our bank accounts.
Yeah, that would be great. I mean, I think we learned from episode 1 that I've been taking an extra $20 out of the ATM each week for the last 30 years, so I'm okay. Storing it at my house.
What's your address again?
Yeah, right, exactly.
I think that...
But, go ahead.
Oh, I'm totally reliant on ATMs. I think this is the one technology that I think is both really sort of usurious. I mean, I think they take high charges off of us for doing it, but that I just cannot stop ATMing.
Yeah, no, I'm the same way. And, I never have more than $100 maybe on me at once. And in fact, it always fascinated me in movies when someone was like, "Go borrow some money," and the guy had $600 on him. I don't know, maybe that's from the 80s when you had to go to the teller window, and so you might as well get $1,000 of cash.
I never really have more than 100 cents.
So that's right, because you take all your money in pennies.
A low bar. I do, but I like the pennies. It makes me feel like I've really got hefty amounts of money. I can just carry on sacks of coin everywhere.
Right.
So here's
pennies, and you throw them in the air.
It's like Scrooge McDuck. I can swim around in my little copper pence. So I have a new thing to worry about. In the Seattle Times, they reported on a report in Science that scientists have reactivated a 30,000-year-old giant virus that was recovered from the permafrost of northeast Siberia.
Oh my God!
which really
What
makes
are they?
why would they do that?
Do we really, as someone who's suffering from a virus right now, I don't think we need any more new viruses.
What you need is a bigger virus, and it's actually it's an older virus, which is huge. It's one of the hugest viruses they've ever recovered. Luckily, it only seems to infect amoeba. But the amoeba of the world, if you're listening, if you guys are fans, Putin and amoebas are really our two biggest fan bases. You should stay away from this giant virus.
Yeah, and on top of it all, it's in Siberia. Now Putin's got a hold of it. It reminds me of that scene from the Transformers movie where they discover the old Transformer. That's the Black Hawk, huge airplane.
I'm with you.
And it just like kicks butt. I mean, I just feel like we do not need an old curmudgeon virus running around affecting us.
I understand.
Way to go, scientists.
It's like the Battlestar Galactica of viruses. I think that the thing is that in that also it's old and clunky. See, I was riffing on the old clunky Transformer thing. But the thing that is, I think the legitimate worry here, right, is that with global warming, this is going to be happening a lot more. And especially because the thing about this virus was it's been frozen for 30,000 years and it was reactivated because of the stability of viral structures. I legitimately think that we're going to see several biological threats that come out of this in the next 10 or 20 years. I don't think that's part of global warming that we've really assimilated so far as the threat that comes from more viral diversity.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is the first story I've seen of this. So on top of the existing viruses mutating every year and becoming stronger and more, becoming stronger. Now we have these old viruses that are going to be coming out and affecting us. This has a disaster movie written all over it. I hope someone grabs a hold of this
before it's too late.
Right, before it's too late. All right, so ready to move on to the third?
Absolutely.
All right. So Alicia Griswold, who's got an awesome Twitter feed. We'll post it on our website, but you can follow her at @AliciaBeth, @Alicia_Beth. Linked to this crazy article about drones with stun guns, and I know you like drones, and so I flagged this for us to talk about.
I love drones.
I know. How could they get any better? Give them a stun gun. So this drone is, they debuted it at South by Southwest this past week. It's called Cupid, just, cute. Oh, you think this is going to be great. It's a Terret hexacopter equipped with an 80,000-volt stun gun. So these guys, this lab created it really to create a conversation around drone technology, personal rights, and the use of drones. But the way they're kind of billing it is that, you could have this at your house. Someone comes across a threshold, the drone will give them a verbal warning, and if they don't comply, it'll stun them until the authorities arrive.
What I love about this story...
They tested it. There's a video. We'll post the video online. They posted this guy getting shocked.
And what I love about it is, A, it's 80,000 volts, so it's 30,000 more than your standard law enforcement taser. So they're not just giving a drone a taser, they're giving it an extra powerful taser. And second, the dude that they tested it on was their intern. You know what I mean? It's like, come, work for us for no money, and we'll shoot you full of 80,000 volts.
Right. So all you interns out there, before you start complaining about not getting paid, just be glad we're not shocking you with the stun guns.
I think, there's been a lot of stuff, a lot of coverage about drones as the future of disaster response. And since we had this conversation, I've kind of been digging into this topic a little more. Emergency Management ran this great piece about insect-sized drones that were being worked on at labs around the country that are federally funded. And a couple places, notably Typhoon Haiyan, which I know we're going to talk about for most of the show today, drones were used to do aerial recon and also aerial mapping. So you can take a drone, you equip it with GPS, it flies over a sector, and then the images from that drone can be stitched together by software to perform sort of on-the-fly mapping of damaged areas, which is something we've done before with satellites, but not to that level of detail. So I think that's all awesome.
That's amazing. Like with any new technology, there's a potential here to really do some good with it and really, progress the industry.
On the flip side, and we're not really, we're not really talking.
That was the Terminator theme.
Thank you. That's going to be a running thread in this conversation. A lot of private citizens are showing up with drones to disaster sites. And this is really fresh. We're not talking about it today, but here in New York City, we had a building collapse from a gas explosion just yesterday. and it was a terrible tragedy, and our prayers are kind of with all the families from it. One thing that was, I guess I would say, tacky or unfeeling a little bit is as soon as this happened, within half an hour, a guy showed up on scene with his sort of toy drone, just
Right.
from home. He comes up, he sets it just inside the perimeter, and then he flies around doing sort of his own private recon and sort of then tweets the videos and hands them off. And I foresee this ecosystem where people come to disasters and there are sort of all of these dozens of private drones flying around. And I think that could be detrimental to the overall response.
Yeah, right. Like, it just adds kind of chaos to the already chaotic situation. But, I do appreciate it's funny, the name of the studio who made this Cupid drone is Chaotic Moon Studios. I do appreciate what they're doing in trying to, start the conversation around, what is government going to do with these? How are we going to prevent or enable citizens to be able to do things like this? So, appreciate them doing it, but, we've got to figure out how they comply with the governments.
And there is a TED Talk now, so we know it's a trend because there is a TED Talk, 6 Ways Drones Can Be Used for Good, which involves a drone landing on the stage at the TED Talk. So it must be okay.
Wow. Yeah, if TED did it, it's okay.
Absolutely.
By the way, have you seen the anti-TED Talk that was given at a TED Talk?
Oh, yeah, the one about how all TED Talks sort of rot your brain and make you believe things that aren't true and you lose your capacity.
Right, it's just kind of like, yeah, exactly, millennium focused, like, we can change the world and do everything. I don't know, it's interesting. Maybe we'll post that on our blog too.
You know how we can change the world? With a giant 30,000-year-old virus.
Or a drone with the virus.
Hold on, I'm just actually trying to make sure that I have a level. So this is me and Alex on the phone.
Nothing.
Oh, okay, thanks. Well done. Okay. Yeah. And so Alex Theran is in the Philippines now. She's on Leyte. She responded there after Typhoon Haiyan, which you probably remember hit in early November, on November 8th, 2013 in the Philippines. It took out Tacloban, a number of other cities and more rural areas there. And it's the deadliest Philippine typhoon on record. It killed more than 6,000 people in just that one country. And it's also the strongest storm ever recorded at landfall. And it was so strong while it was out at sea that they actually had no way of measuring it. That's how strong it was.
It's crazy.
I know. And to me, what's crazy is that it is so quickly forgotten. November is not that long ago. The devastation was incredibly huge, and our consciousness of it is completely gone. So,
right, yeah.
So I want to talk to Alex to get a sense of that, and you're going to see in the conversation, I'm going to play a couple of clips, and it's a pretty extended conversation, but one of the things about disaster zones is that, it can sometimes be a little difficult to get a hold of someone or to keep them on the phone. So here's Alex and I was just kind of talking about what we were going to go through, and then she came in with...
Then let's just get into it. If you have questions, you should just fire away.
All right, sure. I guess before I ask, let me just ask you if you can just take a second and describe exactly... Oh, crap. I just lost you. That's not good. So then I lose her. I get her on the phone finally, and I lose her. And then what she does is she goes down the hill to this woman's house that her team has repurposed into a bar. They stocked her generator-powered fridge with beer, and they put some chairs out so they could use it as a bar. And she bought some international credits for her phone. And I'm sitting there for 15 or 20 minutes in my snug living room in Brooklyn, and that's what she does.
You're what's the deal?
I know,
come on, Alex.
Come on. Well, my time is really precious here.
Hi, sorry about that.
So then
Things have been kind of we don't have power out where I am, even though there's a big geothermal plant. And then I was going to get into the city to do this on the internet, the big city, but they're changing out all of the transformers finally. So there's like planned brownouts and blackouts and no internet. So that's why. And it's been raining, so my solar charger hasn't really been effective. So all of those have been conspiring. I'm really, really sorry.
No, that's fine. So tell me where you are, like, exactly, like right now. Like, how are you making this phone call?
Exactly right now, I'm standing on top of a tractor in the driveway for Kananga Municipal Hospital in Barangay Tugbung in Kananga, Leyte. So that's exactly where I am. And looking out over sugarcane fields.
And what time is it there?
It's about 7 o'clock in Sunday morning.
Okay. All right. So can you just walk me through sort of when you got there and what your mission has been since you got on the ground?
So I got to Leyte, which was one of the islands most severely affected by Typhoon Haiyan, or Typhoon Yoland, as they call it here, on December 2nd, so about 3 weeks after the storm. And since then, I've been part of a volunteer with an organization called All Hands Volunteers, and we have been sort of doing first wave short-term recovery work in private homes, some occasional businesses, and schools.
So let's get into that more in a sec, I guess. But big picture, can you sort of walk me through what sort of the scene looked like? You know, what the major impacts were. I mean, obviously it's been sort of terrible, and we've gotten lots of reports over here, but it's all very vague. You know how the U.S. media filters these things a lot.
When I first got here, it was, any word I'm going to use is very subjective right off the bat, but it was bad. Their debris removal and waste management hadn't been totally worked out on a city or state level, and so all of the power lines were down, just hanging into roads, not even just kind of down on the side of the road. There's, power lines hanging over you, trees hanging over you as you're driving. To me, it kind of looked like a bomb went off over, miles and miles and miles. There were tons of, almost all homes that were hit in the northern part of Leyte that were hit by the storm. The majority lost their roofs, whether it was tin or nipa thatch, which is a thatch that's typical here, made out of a certain kind of palm frond. But most buildings and homes lost at least part of their roof. Like wooden A-frames are down. Tons of debris, people's personal belongings, beaches just littered in personal belongings, and the trees, I think, have impacted me a lot. It's all of the coconut trees, if they're still standing, only have palm fronds on one side of the tree. So it kind of looks like all of the palm trees got a weird Brooklyn haircut at the same time. And the trees have been a big stumbling block for the community, too, whether it's over somebody's pig pen or on top of their house. I've seen massive tamarind trees that are maybe, like 5 to 6 feet in diameter, just flattened somebody's home. So that's kind of what the scene looked like when I first got here.
And just before, tell me before talking about how it changed. I mean, how do you think it lined up, or does it line up with this whole response recovery dichotomy we talk about with the states?
I think that it depends. So in Tacloban, which is where you see those amazing, AP photographs of the boats that have been washed up into the city center.
Right. Yeah.
When I got here December 2nd, first response debris crews were still pulling bodies out of debris along the side of the road.
So, Andrew, and then I lost her again. And right, those are my skills. And so then I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, like, crap, what am I doing? I'm making this woman buy credit to call me from the Philippines while she's there volunteering for an international aid mission, right? So then I manned up and put like, $10 of credits on my my Google account, and then I did what I should have done to begin with, and then I called her back.
Hi.
Nice.
Does this work?
Yeah.
She's like burning through her humanitarian money.
Sorry. I don't know how this international, I thought I had an international subscription, but I don't think, maybe it didn't work with the Google Voice number. I don't know.
I think it's fine. I'm not worried. Honestly, let me just say, I can't believe that I was making you pay for that. That just did not compute in my head for some reason. So obviously this is much better. So just next time you respond to a disaster in a foreign country and I want to like talk to you about it, like let me pay.
All right, sounds good. You can buy me a drink too to make it up to me when I get back.
Awesome.
I really like whiskey.
Good. Do they have whiskey?
They totally have that here.
Do they?
No, no. They have brandy and they have rum, and they have two kinds of beer. One is like a normal sort of lager. It's pretty bad, but then one is a kind of disgusting, bitter tasting beer, but it's 8% alcohol by volume.
Whoa.
And there's something else in there because Red Horse Drunk is just a whole different level. I feel like that's been one of my lessons learned coming back to the Philippines.
Okay.
Is no Red Horse.
All right. So we don't know what it is, but there is some ingredient in Red Horse that knocks you on your ass. Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough. All right. So when we were talking, it was 3 weeks in. There was still some body removal happening in Tacloban, but it depended on sort of the situation. I mean, what were the sort of the lines? What were the kind of discrepancies you would say between sort of regular response and recovery when we break it up like that?
I think that whenever you have a disaster that has the support of the international community and you're dealing with governmental and non-governmental aid, it's always going to be different than on an independent domestic level, especially like how we do things in the United States. Obviously we're a country that's rejected foreign aid on occasions. So you don't just have the Filipino government acting, but you also have the UN, and not just the Red Cross, but the Canadian Red Cross and the Danish Red Cross and the American Red Cross, Doctors Without Borders, Save the Children, and they're all organized, big quotes, but they're all sort of supposed to be organized by the UN cluster system. And then you have small NGOs like the one that I'm volunteering with that is also sort of supposed to be collaborating under the cluster system. So you just have so many different players doing different things, and everybody's response and recovery times vary. So you just see different organizations doing different types of things. I would say that when I got to for Ormoc, the response phase, it wasn't over because there was still, and there still is, an extensive amount of aid being provided, and people still didn't have tarps and were living in homes without roofs. But I would say when I first got there, people were still hungry. People still hadn't gotten food. We had set up, or we agreed to manage sort of a pop-up distribution center. We got food packages out to the barangays, which is, barangay is a word loosely means neighborhood, but they're usually bigger than what we would think of as a neighborhood, and they're very well organized in a local government kind of way. So
let's.
We got out to the barangays, and there were hungry people, and so that phase of the response was still going on. But that ended kind of, I would say, days, a week max into my time.
And we're gonna get there in a second. Let me just dig into one thing about like the cluster system that I've always been curious about, and that Paul Farmer writes about this, about Haiti, is this kind of mass chaos that provides, and all this sort of wrestling. So when you say that you guys agreed to take on a distribution center, I guess, can you personalize that or talk a little bit about how your small nonprofit and your experience fitting into that system, sort of how that works, becoming like one arm of that octopus?
So, in fact, we were not.
Okay.
We were totally operating outside of the cluster system for that project. We were operating with private local donors. When we first got to Ormoc, our base was actually like a 5-star hotel that we lived in the banquet hall, and I personally was camping on the roof of. And it had been pretty.
How many stars do you get on the roof, I guess, is my question.
1 million stars, all of the stars on the roof. It was 1 million stars.
Oh, that's great. That's much better.
So the hotel had been badly damaged. The Canadian Red Cross and one other NGO, which I'm now forgetting, was occupying the rooms. But we had been allowed, I believe, for free to stay in the banquet hall, so it was just rows of sleeping bags. We weren't allowed to use the hotel accommodations, really. We sort of went in and out through the service exit. I slept on the roof in a tent, and the owner of that hotel had agreed to take on private donations of goods in kind.
Okay.
So obviously when you do that, and especially in such a large-scale disaster, people want to help, and there was a huge, just massive outpouring of goods that then needed to be organized, packaged, and delivered, and they didn't have the capacity to do that. So by the time we arrived, they had all these goods, but no system to get them out into the communities, and that's what we did.
And I think one thing that you've said about your nonprofit, and will you say the name again so we can make sure to get that out there?
It's All Hands Volunteers.
So is that All Hands likes to work in places that may be underserved or overlooked by larger response communities. So how did they? And I think it makes total sense that you'd find a mission and go for it. How did that connection happen with that particular neighborhood and that particular hotel?
So before All Hands goes into, brings volunteers into an environment, there's obviously an assessment phase. And what they do is they not just go and look and see and talk to people and meet with local government officials and groups, but they looked at OCHA situation reports from the field. And
sure.
They looked at sort of what NGOs had committed, what resources to what parts of the island, and the majority of the NGOs were committed to projects and relief efforts in Tacloban, because Tacloban was and has been just so badly devastated.
Right.
But Ormoc also was badly devastated, although it didn't have the casualties that Tacloban did, because Tacloban was one of the first cities where the typhoon made landfall.
Right.
But still had sort of huge amount of need without the NGO presence, and so also. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh well, so they did a gaps assessment, and that moved them in. I mean, so it's a very sort of a thoughtful process to find that and move folks in.
Yes.
So what were you going to say? Just to.
So I think it was just through those connections.
There you go.
Through those connections, and All Hands has had a Philippines presence for a while now. So using the people, the local staff that they've worked with in the past, and making those connections, reaching out that way.
So I think part of what's important there is, you're looking over an area, you're trying to find the places the missions are most needed. So then talk about, part of what you started to go into at the beginning was this process of when you got there, you were in a certain phase with food distribution, and then the mission sort of changed over into salvage, and then now into sort of renovation of the medical centers. So how did that happen? Because I think one thing that's important to understand that I'm trying to get my brain around is the fluidity of these situations and especially the task delegation and sort of how that occurs. You know what I mean? So I'm wondering if you could talk through the story of that transition a little bit.
So this is now our third volunteer base since the project's been open, which is about 66 or 67 days at this point. And we've had about 40 to 60 volunteers on base at any given time. And the assessment team goes and they find homes and they find schools and they talk to people, and then we work. In central Ormoc City, we essentially worked ourselves out of work. There's obviously always still more to be done, but we're not the only ones working. The homeowners are also working. The community members are
great.
also working. There's a word here called Bayanihan, and it essentially means unity and community, and there's something on the island of Leyte called the Bayanihan system. So if something needs to be done in the community, the whole community contributes what they can, be it human or non-human resources. So when we go out into the field, oftentimes we're working on a home and the homeowner might be at work, but his brother-in-law shows up, or, his aunt or his cousin shows up and works alongside of us. And maybe they bring their own tools, or maybe they just bring themselves and we lend them a crowbar. But I think what's been amazing is, A, how quickly the volunteers have worked, but also just we're constantly working with the community to rebuild. And so they're a huge part of the process.
So that's really so that's really important, I think, just because one thing that happens, or that people say happen in these situations, is that communities that get impacted by disasters fall into this kind of development spiral where they become sort of dependent on aid, and then the aid sort of has to stay, and then it makes the people sort of less self-sufficient, and it's like this death spiral for a community. Do you think that's happening there, or do you think that this involvement that the community has and the kind of passion they have to fix it is fighting against that?
Both, but I think primarily there has been a huge push of self-sufficiency and pride and aid to recover. The Philippines is in the developing world, but it's also very up and coming. It's had one of the largest GDP growths of any country in the past year. Tourism is becoming huge here. And I've sort of had the honor of, I was volunteering in the Philippines this summer on building homes for the victims of a different typhoon, and I worked alongside 85 Filipino construction workers and contractors and had a blast, but I've never seen anybody work as hard as these men did this summer. And I think that the other thing you have in the Philippines is you have a huge sense of community and of family. I mean, people have massive extended families networks here, so even if you are poor, you still have a huge support network and a huge social network. And in a disaster, in terms of resiliency, I think what really brings people down is being cut off. But here, people in Ormoc, they had family in Tacloban, and somebody's uncle would go out and drive to that person's house and find out where they were and bring news back to Ormoc. Or, when the cell towers were down, it was a lot of this sort of on the foot, on the ground. Nobody's radio was working. People didn't have power. They didn't have TV, and they thought that it was the end of the world. But still, they would send somebody out to check on their other family members.
So what do you think? Those are all great. I mean, those all are very good, positive things about the community. You said both. I mean, are there worries about the community too? It's long-term resilience.
I've heard rumors from people who own land, farmers who own land, that because of food aid, they're having trouble getting their workers back into the field. But again, it's all about perspective, and it's all about who's telling you, whether it's because of the rice or it's because those people need to fix their homes and the homes of their extended family before they can get back to their normal lives. I'm not one to really be
Absolutely.
able to say for sure.
Yeah.
But people have definitely gotten back to business and very rapidly.
And it's early days.
So
I mean, it's very, it's very, very close to it for that. You were going to say.
When I got to Ormoc, even 3 weeks after the storm, there were restaurants open. Most businesses had generators going. Things were very expensive. There was a lot of sort of post-storm price gouging, and there was a lot of scarcity, but that's also started coming back down, and things are priced closer to what they were before the storm and things like that. So things were, even though everything was sort of visually looked catastrophic, things were actually functioning to an extent.
So I think, and then as they started functioning, the assessment teams moved you guys into salvage of homes, and then you were managing some volunteer teams doing that, and you're moving into this healthcare renovation. Is that a different phase to you? Do you think that shows a new phase of recovery that's happening, or is it just sort of more of a local mission for you guys?
No, I definitely think that it sort of marks the transition between short and long-term recovery. When we came up to Kananga and met with the Kananga district planning director, what he told us, we said we're looking for homes, and what he told us was that most people have either rebuilt or they've abandoned their homes and moved elsewhere to make money. And what we're really in need of is help for our local schools and our hospitals and our churches and our government buildings, because even though there is some money there to make those repairs, the labor just isn't there because of what I mentioned before, which is that anybody with trade skills is working to help their own families and their friends right now get back into their homes. So even if there's a job for them to take, they're still sort of working on rebuilding their living spaces.
So you've sort of been there. I mean, what's amazing about kind of your story is that you've been there to see sort of the end of response, and you've been there to see sort of these local short-term recovery stuff moving into more long-term sustainment issues for healthcare. What do you think happens next? Like, where do you see that community going in the next weeks or months?
Our volunteer community or the Kananga?
The Kananga community. Well, both, I guess. I mean, because part of this is the sustenance and sustainment of volunteers in those areas.
So this hospital project is a partnership with World Health Organization. I believe it's their funds that are being used to rebuild this hospital, and we are the implementing team. We're the labor. And that sort of speaks to, if I can back it up a little bit, how do you make partnerships and how do you move forward? And the fluidity of it all is that you meet people. You share a hotel with the Red Cross, and they introduce you to the WHO, or you go to the health cluster meeting and you learn what the unmet needs are, or the education cluster meeting. We're also working on schools. I think Kananga has been slower to recover because they still don't have power coming from their municipality. They're a little bit further out. It's more of an agricultural region that supports the bigger city of Ormoc, which is adjacent. So that's been slower. And there's a lot of long-term effects on individuals in disasters, which I think we all learned with Hurricane Sandy and Hurricane Katrina and some of the tornadoes that we've had in the Midwest. When I'm talking to school principals, they're still telling me, well, most of our students' belongings were blown away, so they only have one shirt and one pair of pants. So for the younger students, if those are dirty and their parents haven't been able to manage to wash them, they won't come to school. They won't get sent to school, and so there's more absenteeism. If it's raining, this school was used as an evacuation center, and the children are traumatized, and they can't go out if it's raining. They start crying. They don't want to go to school. And then this specific principal also in Kananga was telling me that they tested all of their students' BMIs, and even though they've had food, they've been eating sardines and rice for the past 2 months,
Right.
and it hasn't exactly been nutritious, and the average student at her school is underweight and undernourished.
So I mean, you can start to see how it feeds into these long-term kind of structural issues that then last and last. I mean, I guess, so then let me just ask the other part of that question, which is, what do you see about the resources being there to address those things? I mean, do you think the volunteer community that you guys have had in place is going to sort of stay and work on those things longer term? Or is there, you talked about these relationships. Do the relationships lead to like a handoff to a more structured work, or does the community have to step in and take it up?
I think as the community rebuilds and things get back to normal a little bit more, and people feel secure in whatever repairs they've made on their homes and are getting back to work, and have access to fresh fruits and vegetables, those things will slowly change and shift and go back to a more normal way of life. But in terms of the organization that I'm working with here now, it's all about structures. So it's deconstruction and salvage work, but also rebuilding, and those are our primary focuses, and that's actually sort of what we physically do. But we like to focus on schools and now this hospital, because you give one person back a home and you give maybe five to 10 people a roof, but when you give a community back a school, you're giving those parents somewhere to send their kids so they can get back to work and do what they need to do to rebuild the lives of their families. And so there is, where we can, this organization really likes to focus on schools.
So how big,
as much as we can.
How big is that reconstruction task then? I mean, are there, sort of schools upon schools to do? Are you just taking it one day at a time? How far in the future do you think those reconstruction efforts stretch?
Pretty far into the future. I can't say for certain, but I think that this organization will be here for a while. They're not, when I worked with them in the Philippines this summer, it was the tail end of a almost two-year project that started with early response and recovery, mucking and gutting people's homes, to having a partnership with Habitat for Humanity and building the survivors of that storm new homes, implementing work programs that employed the survivors of that typhoon and gave them skills and gave them training programs and helped them buy tools. So I have actually sort of the utmost respect for All Hands, because they don't just leave, I guess, after it stops being exciting. They stick around for the community, and they implement programs, albeit around things like construction. And so I think that they'll probably do something similar with this event. How do we plan for the schools? In Kananga, we went to the planning office. We talked to Henry. He told us that he would be happy to come up with a strategic plan for us, which was great, because it was a huge help. And he explained how the school districts work here, and we're hitting the three mother schools, the three schools that sort of that all the other schools report up to, and we're taking down unsafe roofs, we're doing deconstruction, we're doing debris removal, chainsaw work, but we realized that all of the schools, since we've gotten here, have been asking us to put up tarps, because they all have tarps, but they don't have the access to the labor to actually do it. And we've said, no, we don't really know about tarping, it's dangerous, we don't know if we want to have volunteers up on roofs. But eventually the need was just so apparent, became so great, that the organization agreed that we would contribute man-hours as long as the schools contributed materials. Most of the schools have tarps that are just sitting in an office right now that they can't get up on the roofs. And we have, in the past 2 weeks, piloted a tarping program. and we are about to finish tarping our third building. And as silly as it sounds, it feels really great because the high school that I've been working on for the past 2 weeks, they lost 9 classrooms, and they have 2,000 students, and what that's meant for the students is that they only go to school 3 days a week.
Wow.
So really giving that classroom space is a huge benefit for those families, for 2,000 odd families.
And which is, it's an amazing mission, and we've talked about the work and all this kind of abstract structural stuff, but let's talk about Henry for a minute, or by which I mean, can we just dig into sort of the day to day? What is Alex's sort of day like when you wake up on the roof of the hotel or wherever it is? Walk me through sort of what it's like on an operational period.
Sure. I currently have my tent set up on the hospital lawn at the edge of a sugarcane field. Some kids start playing basketball, and the roosters start really getting into their thing around 5:15. It doesn't get light out until about 5:30, but I usually get up around then. Have instant coffee and a peanut butter sandwich.
Good. Classic response food. At least that doesn't change.
Typically I'm leading a team, so I get a wheelbarrow out from behind the morgue and wheel it over to our tools tent, load it up with whatever I'm going to need for the project for the day, get water, get a first aid kit, get my team together and out the door, and we load all of the tools and all of our stuff for the day onto a jeepney, which I don't know if you've ever seen one, but they are, for lack of a better word, I'm going to go really late 20th century on you right now. It's a super pimped out World War II American transit vehicle that they use.
Sure.
They were essentially jeeps that are really, really long, like buses, with huge tires, and they're painted with all sorts of colors and cartoon characters and flames and aphorisms. And we get onto one of those, and we like to ride on the roof, and then we go to the site, and if it's a home, sometimes the homeowner is there, sometimes we've just gotten prior permission, and if they haven't already cleared out their belongings, then we help them clear out their belongings, set things aside, consult them on where they want things put in their yard or on the street, and we sort of go to town with our sledgehammers or crowbars or whatever it is.
So have you gotten better with the sledgehammer since you've been there?
I would say that sledging is my number one skill at this point.
Wow.
I've developed incredible endurance. I was terrible with a crowbar when I first got here, but I've learned the importance of both torque and leverage, and I'm able to sort of teach other people how to denail a roof, which is always surprising to me. But yeah, you learn basic tool skills and how to use them effectively, and it's just hours. I mean, I do it all day long. So you can't be that bad after a while.
So what's the most sort of ridiculous thing that's happened to you in your kind of response world since you've been there?
That's a really good question. A lot. Oh, this is good. So our third day, I just dropped a mug off of scaffolding, for the record.
So much for your coffee.
The third day I was here, we showed up at a school, and we were expecting for it to just be us moving debris and taking some stuff apart. But when we got there, there were 15 sailors from the Navy and a lieutenant and another NGO, and we were all at the school at the same time. And the other NGO was doing something different. They were putting tin roofs on. They're called Shelter for Humanity. But we ended up, I was team leading that day, and we ended up partnering with the Filipino Navy to clean up this school, and had so much fun, and we're supposed to go back to base for lunch, but they invited us to come share lunch with them, and they were having lunch at a different school that was the beneficiary of a food program set up by some Filipino branches of the Rotary Club. So we got to help serve a bunch of kids food, and we hung out with the Philippine Navy, and they invited us to their battleship that night. So
Nice.
It was very close to where we were staying. So we went to their battleship and had the grand tour. It was an old World War II battleship that they've, I don't know, somehow maintained.
Yeah.
Because it actually was used in a conflict in Mindanao this fall in Zamboanga, so it's still functioning. And we were on the deck taking pictures with the guys that we had met that day, and they said to us, "Do you like to sing?" Which seems like a weird question, but in the Philippines only means one thing, which is that there's a video key machine or a karaoke machine very, very close by. So obviously we love to sing.
Yeah, of course.
And
I like that this is like
brought us
this is the Philippine Navy's version of "Do you want to come see my etchings?" You know, you're up on the battleship, you're doing the karaoke. What happens next? That's what I want to know.
So they take us into their operations center, sort of their command center of the battleship, filled with portraits of commanding officers, and they bring us Sprite and an orange soda drink called Royal and some like hot boiled peanuts, and we proceed to sing and Britney Spears and just like classic rock songs
Sure.
for the next 2 hours in a battleship, and that was day 3, which was pretty ridiculous and pretty exciting.
Wow.
For all of us involved.
Here's it from a response perspective, and I just want to give a shout out to the boiled peanuts, which is my native food as a Georgian. I'm glad that is being echoed in the South Pacific too. Is from a response perspective, okay, this sounds the web of relationships in there, the clustering, and you're meeting these folks, and you're gonna go decide to do this thing with these guys, and it's kind of like it's like an ICS guy's nightmare. You know what I mean? It's like there's no operations, there's no logistics chain. It's kind of like a bunch of people mingling at a cocktail party, kind of. So I guess my question to you as an emergency manager is, do you miss that? Are there places where that has been useful? Do you think you've decided that the relationships really are key and that there's just too much, focus on command systems over here? What do you think you've learned about command structures in this massive karaoke cocktail party of the Philippines response?
I've learned that it works for a smaller organization like this one that doesn't have as many pre-existing relationships. It's a little bit, I think, of a slower process than it might be for a major NGO. But when I went to the Rotary Club that day with the Navy, we met a man named Andrew, who is one of the top people in his chapter of the Rotary Club, and he was working with this group, Shelter for Humanity. I got his number. I brought it back to the staff here. They made contact with Andrew. He's from Ormoc. His family owns a private school, and he's just dedicated himself to acting as a translator and an assessor for different NGOs since the storm has happened, and he helped us make connections and gave the organization good advice and connected us with other NGOs.
Yeah.
And that was sort of because my debris team had lunch with the Filipino Navy. So there's a big NGO presence here, and people are mingling, and people are in the same areas, and they go to the cluster meetings and they talk about what the unmet needs are. I don't know if there would be a way to standardize the process in the same way that we have with FEMA and ICS and NIMS, because every situation is different. Every foreign government that invites foreign aid into their country has different qualifications for what that aid can do and how they can participate in the response and the recovery of the disaster. And so you have things like the Sphere Handbook that gives best practices,
Right.
And you have things like the UN Shelter Cluster that gives people a forum to talk about what they're doing in that instance. But I think that's kind of what works and can still be really fine-tuned, but that works because of how ambiguous foreign disaster relief can be.
It's a loose web.
Depending on what
Sure.
the host government wants or doesn't want, or what infrastructure is available in the country.
Yeah, it's amazing what shout out to the Sphere Handbook too. I mean, that's one of my favorite tools. It's amazing that, the common languages are sort of that and Britney Spears and not, ops or planning or logistics. But everybody loves karaoke. And I think what I just learned from that conversation is the next time I'm in a response, I'm going to bring karaoke into the mix, because I think that's the best way to make build bridges across cultures, it sounds like.
Well, I responded to Sandy with you, Mitch, and I think that you could have definitely used some karaoke at key moments. I think we all could have.
Right.
I think that's a great
We should be
idea.
less scared of karaoke. I guess anything else you want to tell us or make sure we know before we kind of say good morning here?
I think I just want to tell people that, before I started volunteering, I was really skeptical of this type of volunteerism, because I assumed that it would be exploitative. I assumed that the money that I spent on a plane ticket to get here would better meet needs if I donated
Sure.
to an NGO that was on the ground and had an official staff. And there's tons and tons of reasons why people in the international disaster relief work don't like working with volunteers, and a lot of them are legitimate, but I'm definitely, my thoughts on this have completely turned around, because it really matters to the people here that this far out, that people still care and they're still paying attention, and that they've left their homes to help, the community of Kananga or the community of Ormoc. It really matters. And, I think if you just think about your personal experience, even if have never left your hometown, and the moments when you're the lowest and you realize that people care about you, even if you may not know them that well, or share anything in common, those are some of the most touching.
Well, thanks for standing on your tractor and talking to me for this whole time. And sorry you lost your coffee mug. I hope it's okay down there somewhere.
Thank you.
So that was me and Alex Theran from down there in the Philippines, and I just want to say that she's down there with All Hands Volunteers, and you can get their website at hands.org. And Alex has a blog, Disaster Trends, which is a disaster lifestyle blog, which features them in Philippine thrift store dengue fever costumes, which is at dstrtrends.wordpress.com.
Yeah, and we'll post the links to both websites on our blog, and as well as Alex's Twitter handle, which she doesn't use very often because she's too busy responding. But what a powerful interview. I mean, she's doing great work, and it's interesting to me a couple of things. One, that the institutions that we've built here, the infrastructure that we have here in the States, while very helpful in some regards, also kind of keeps us in our EOCs instead of out responding. I know that's, and just the example that she gave of, out in the field, she's meeting people, she's making connections and building and going from there.
Yeah, and it's funny how it's like heresy. Like, I was asking her these questions about, so would ICS be useful? And I was like nervous. Do you know what I mean? Because it's so ingrained that like we really do you need that? And I think, one thing we'll need to dig into another time is the UN cluster system and how that could learn from incident command in terms of forming these operational clusters. But you can't lose having a guy, like having Henry, the dude, set you up with a strategic plan, or having these soldiers that you can do karaoke with and then coming up with operations. Like those informal connections really are the meat of effective disaster response in a lot of ways.
Right, absolutely, and that's definitely a lesson we can take to heart here. And at the same time, maybe a little more structure and formality in the response overseas could make some of those responses.
Anyway, if you're listening, don't forget about the Philippines. Lots of people are still accepting donations, including all hands, and the work there is very real. And I think one really powerful point that Alex made is that it's a country where the citizens are really invested in their own recovery, and they want to lead it, and they want to do it. They want to pull it together themselves, and they just need a little bit of a leg up to get that done. So.
Yeah, and I'd say, also, follow Alex's example. If you feel called to go overseas and respond for a limited amount of time, do it. It's obvious that, she's really making a difference over there.
All right, so that's our special edition of Dukes of Hazzards, the interview show. Can I just how do you feel? Have you thrown up anymore during this show?
I got to say, once during the interview, I had to make a dash for the trash can.
Yeah, no, that's how we want to end. We want to end with a feel-good riff, just like that, about vomit. Vomit.
I did Google difference between coronavirus and norovirus. I think I have norovirus.
Would you like to talk us through the symptoms about how you know that it's one and all?
Yeah, no, let's not. But I know the listeners were wondering
the
about that.
The epidemiologist can rest easy.
That's right. All right, so a couple things to mention as we close out. We'll post links to all the blogs, all the news articles, Alex's blog on our website. Also, if you haven't been to the blog, you can. We updated the link to Wirecutter's great list of emergency gear for any situation, and we also posted a link to Oakley Hall, who lives here in New York City, and he made this awesome kind of urban-focused go bag. And he has pictures of everything that goes in it, and he has a podcast called Coming In Sideways. This is great. So check out his go bag. Check out his podcast. Email us with questions, suggestions for the show. If there's a question you want us to answer, we have a good one we're going to get to next week. Our email address is updated to hazardspodcast@gmail.com. And you can find us on Twitter at Hazards Podcast. And, of course, our website is Dukes of Hazards Podcast.
And one day we're going to get a shorter address than that. And I think next time we're going to talk about Fukushima. We're going to talk about the West Virginia water contamination incident and all kinds of fun stuff.
Yeah, we're going to talk about my favorite new TV show, Broad City, who did a Hurricane Wanda episode.
I hope you feel better, Andrew.
On Hurricane Sandy.
And we're out.
Thank you.